Welcome to New York Got Game.
All right, we're back with another edition of New York Got Game. Later this week, the 2024 NBA Draft will go down on Wednesday as we are in full off-season mode. There are big questions surrounding the Knicks this offseason, and it's really going to start with what should they do in the draft. At this time, when we're recording this, the Knickerbockers have 2 first-round selections and a second-round selection. So on this episode, we're going to look and evaluate some prospects for New York with a special guest. Tim Kitzrow, let's go. Take us to the break.
The Knicks are heating up.
So when it came to talking about the draft, I wanted to make sure that we got somebody on who is basically, for lack of a better term, a draft junkie. This person needed to be plugged in and watching prospects all year long so that we, the basketball community, can be even better informed heading into Wednesday's draft. Joining me to talk about the Knicks in the 2024 NBA Draft is the host of Knicks Film School's Draft Class and also Dream, a.k.a. Draft Rules Everything Around Me podcast. From Knicks Film School, obviously, and a recent graduate of Fordham University, my guy, Kris Pursiainen. How you doing, man?
Good, Dex. Thank you so much for having me on. This is an exciting draft class because there's a whole lot of variety in terms of how people view these players. It's, to me, the perfect one to talk about like this.
Perfect one. I thought you were you're the perfect person to come up here and talk about it because you have been doing so much research, so many hours, so much film study, as all the people at Knicks Film School do. They're studying the film, and you've been doing that. So let's get right into it, okay? Let's start with this as a topic because, as you know, Knicks have 3 picks at the time of this recording in this draft, right? Number 24, number 25 overall, also number 38 overall. Here's the money question, though. What's the likelihood that the Knicks make all 3 of those selections in this year's draft? And if you don't think they're going to take all 3, how many selections do you think they should and will take in this year's draft?
So we'll start with the likelihood. I will say it's low. The Knicks making 3 selections in this draft is not likely to me at all, and I don't think that has as much to do with the perception of this draft class by NBA talent evaluators, but more so the fact that the Knicks have never taken 3 prospects in a draft under head coach Tom Thibodeau, except for when one of them is a draft and stash over in Europe. So adding to that, they're now the best team they've been since having Tom Thibodeau as their head coach. And say they did wind up with 2 or 3 selections, I don't think you would see more than one, if even one, playing significant minutes in their rookie year. Now, in terms of what they should do, I think they should draft 1 or 2 players. If they draft 3, one should be a draft and stash, and we'll get into candidates for that. But they could use an infusion of young talent, cost-controlled talent, and say they don't want to use all of their draft picks, that's okay, right? But you're going to see them do what they've done throughout the years since they've hired Leon Rose in March 2020 to run basketball operations, which is operate through the lens of preparing for a future star trade. So what does that mean? It means kicking the can down the road, it draws the ire of many fans, but exchanging their draft selection for future draft picks that can be leveraged in a star trade with other teams.
It's a plan that I'm not 100% opposed to, but I kind of agree with you. I actually agree a lot with you on this in terms of a good thing that can go for the Knicks is adding depth to this roster, especially if we're going to get into this in the next question about running it back possibly. But adding some depth, adding some youth could be helpful for this team. And that's why I'm like, maybe taking a couple players can't hurt. That you think maybe your NBA ready could come in and help this team. What we have seen in the last couple of years, and the fans know this as well too, the Knicks have hit on some picks at the end of the draft, late in the first round, also early in the second round. So maybe it'll do it here this year. But let's get to this, because when you look at this roster, before we get to free agency with the draft, what do you feel are the areas of need that you would like to see the Knickerbockers address on draft day? What are those areas they should be focused on here at the 2024 draft?
I think, reacting too much to a playoff series or a playoff run can obviously have its cons, but I think this past playoff run for the New York Knicks showed them that your 3rd and 4th stringers need to be players that you're comfortable giving minutes in the playoffs. Alec Burks had 5 straight games of contribution coming back from the dead to give the Knicks positive play in the playoffs. And on that note, whether they re-sign Burks or not, I think they could target a secondary ball handler, someone who can alleviate some pressure from Jalen Brunson if they play together, or maybe even run that second unit along with Deuce McBride. And in the same token of whether they re-sign Burks or not, I think whether they re-sign Precious Achiuwa or not, the New York Knicks could benefit from upgrading the third-string center spot. Maybe, depending on how free agency goes with Isaiah Hartenstein, they might need a backup center. I can't see Tom Thibodeau entrusting a rookie with significant minutes, 18 or more per game, but injuries happen. They're part of the game, and the Knicks know well from last season. I joked on the last draft class, if they had a mascot, he would have gotten hurt during the last playoffs, that they need backup. They need a lot of weapons to have and throw out there, and I think a center from this draft class could benefit them a lot.
I think you also make another good point in the importance of going 10, 11 deep, right? Trusting those players, because you saw the Pacers were able to do that. Even though they were healthier, they had more bodies they could throw at the Knicks, and these were guys who had got minutes during the regular season. I personally believe that matters, and I think it would help the Knicks a lot if they could add to their depth and some youth. That helps too in terms of that for the upcoming season. Okay, this is what the people want. Let's go through some of the players that, even if the Knicks don't move up, okay, Kris, or they do choose to move up, that they could be interested in. Now, you know this. There's been some talk about Ryan Dunn out of Virginia as a player that the Knicks could consider. Now, Dunn, and I watch a lot of ACC basketball, he's shown flashes of brilliance on defense, but his offensive game, especially the shooting, it's been a concern. A lot left to be desired there. How do you see his development path? And could his defensive prowess just alone, does that make him a valuable asset for the Knicks and somebody they could want to put in their rotation?
Absolutely. So Ryan Dunn certainly presents several offensive issues. He was a 23% three-point shooter over his 2 seasons at Virginia, and he took less than 1 per game on average. His defensive highlights, however, look like he was the entire defensive backroom of the Legion of Boom. I mean, this guy is in passing lanes, it's easy to fall in love with the idea of Dunn and an OG Anunoby terrorizing opposing offensive game plans and stifling them the way that good teams stop the ball and get teams uncomfortable off kilter, right? He's not someone I could see Tom Thibodeau planning to have in the rotation early on, but he could provide spot minutes, again, in case of injury, case of emergency, and there's a connection as well. He's been working with Jerry Powell out on Long Island. When Leon Rose represented Eddie Curry and he was on the New York Knicks, William Wesley, the vice president of basketball operations for New York, set up Jerry Powell and Eddie Curry for summer workouts and training. So the Knicks, if there's any team in the NBA that has the best intel on Ryan Dunn and where he's at right now, I think it would be the Knicks because of the long-standing relationship between Wesley and Powell.
I wonder about his fit, because the concern for me is the 23% shooting there, and he gives you kind of Andre Roberson vibes in that way. Good defender, but doesn't shoot the ball well from the outside. He's not confident to shoot it from the outside. This Knicks team needs to worry about their spacing. So while I love the defensive upside, I think fans are also concerned about that shooting. We'll see if he's somebody the Knicks would target. Now, I heard you talk about this on your pod recently with Sam Vecini when you had him on. Tyler Kolek from Marquette. Considering the Knicks' need for a playmaker, which you mentioned in terms of one of their needs, who can also provide some spacing, how well do you think Tyler Kolek's skill set would fit into the Knicks system? Because you've heard this comp. A lot of people say he's, like a T.J. McConnell.
Yes. On
the Pacers. You're getting a lot of that T.J. McConnell light or T.J. McConnell plus. I've heard T.J. McConnell plus in that way, too. Do you think his skill set does it compare to McConnell, and do you think he fits in this Knicks system?
Well, thanks for listening to the show. And
hey, I got to do my homework, man.
Kolek is certainly a different kind of player from Ryan Dunn, not just in the position they play, but in large part due to his steady, trustable offensive game. He shot almost 36% from downtown, taking almost 7 3-pointers a game. He's a shooter, and he's reliable. He can get an offense into its sets. He's a pure point guard, the way that people like to describe certain playmakers, and he can lead on and off the court. I love Deuce McBride's game. I had a top 20 grade on Deuce McBride when the Knicks got him at 36, but I don't think it would hurt for the Knicks' second unit to potentially benefit from the more natural playmaking that someone like Kolek can offer you, and he fits like a glove with Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks locker room, who just love players who will work nonstop, who can lead, who are confident. And he's a multi-year college player. That's been Walt Perrin's bread and butter in the late first round. A lot of those hits, Emmanuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride, are players that people perceived as not having a lot of upside, and that players that played several years in college. I think Kolek fits both of those boxes in terms of people thinking he kind of is what he is. But what he is a player who would bring spacing to the table, who would bring confident playmaking to the table. He's 6'2" with a 6'3" wingspan, right? His measurements aren't breaking anyone's charts, but he gets the job done. And I think the Knicks, not to make a player comparison, but just philosophically here, have learned from Jalen Brunson that, size is not everything, and heart and craft and footwork matter too.
Yeah, that stuff does matter. Let me ask you this as a follow-up on that. If the Knicks were to take him, do you see him as the ability to play off the bench with a Miles McBride? Could you play them both in the backcourt together? Is that something you could see happening?
Yes, I think you could. And the same way that we saw Tom Thibodeau, because of the injuries the Knicks faced this season, go from never wanting to play Jalen Brunson and Deuce McBride together to leaning on the backcourt tandem of Jalen Brunson and Deuce McBride in NBA playoff basketball. I could see that going well with Kolek and McBride, especially because they complement each other, right? McBride has learned to be a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. The Garden crowd goes, Deuce, when he catches the ball in the corner because they want him to shoot that thing. Kolek would be the one setting him up for those looks. And conversely, McBride could drive. People want to respect his pull-up jumper in the mid-range. He can kick out to Kolek for easy threes as well. The two of them would be a feisty duo in the backcourt.
Yeah, it seems like it would be interesting to see them both in the backcourt coming off the bench. Okay, Kris, let's do this. Let's look at some centers. Go to the bigs, okay? Zach Edey, fresh off the national championship with Purdue. I think he's interesting because you got the size, 7'4". Obviously, that's a massive advantage. We said everything's not about size, but look, size still helps sometimes in the NBA. However, as folks know, in the NBA, we've been trending towards more mobility and versatility in terms of bigs. How do you assess his fit, Edey that is, with a team like the Knicks?
Edey is a bruiser. He's a throwback big. I saw someone recently compare his game to Robert Parrish's, and I got a good laugh out of that because it's like, sometimes people go back in time for player comparisons and they do like the 90s. This was a little different, right? But here's the thing. When Edey's on the court, most of the time, he's going to be the strongest guy on the court wearing a jersey of any color. And just like the other names we've discussed, he fits the Thibodeau and the Walt Perrin bill of being a multi-year college player who improved in their time in college. And I think he actually went from being overrated last year to underrated now this year in terms of what he can bring to the table. Yes, the mobility is certainly something that appears more so on the cons list than the pros list, but Tom Thibodeau has a penchant for drop coverage, and I think that makes it a viable fit. You just have to be careful about getting stuck playing 4-on-5 in transition because Edey is still making his way up the court. That said, if I could get odds on the first rookie in this draft class to average 18 or 20 points a game in a feature role off the bench, I'd take him because dumping down low to him in the post, obviously he's not going to have the 35% usage rate he did at Purdue where it seemed like every single play involved Edey in some way, but he can get it done down there. And the other aspect of this is the Knicks have targeted offensive rebounders for many years now. Mitchell Robinson, they kept around. Josh Hart, they brought in. Kolek and Edey, despite being quite different in size, are both good offensive rebounders for their position, and I think they both serve as a fit there.
Yeah, Edey would be a very interesting fit, and for the fans out there that like a little throwback basketball, a little back-to-the-basket basketball, he can do that for you for sure. Let's talk about another center, Deron Holmes, out of Dayton. I know you've seen a lot of him. He's intrigued me, but I've seen projections on him go anywhere from late first round to early second round to mid-second round. I've seen a wide gap with him. For me, he looks like a player who's got some two-way potential here. Given the Knicks' defensive schemes, talked about Tom Thibodeau liking to play drop coverage, is he the kind of big that could come in and have an impact on the Knicks in his rookie season? Do you see him as an impact player in his rookie season in the NBA?
It's tough, right? He's definitely an interesting case of teams needing to have a vision for him and needing to believe in that vision for him as a player. He's talented offensively, and he can be really fun to watch unless, like me, you went to Fordham and you watched him ball out against your team. But the question, most importantly, in my opinion, with his fit on the New York Knicks would be just that, the extent to which he can contribute early. They used to draft that way when they were winning 41 games. They turned in a 50-win season last year. Do you think he can start out at the 5? I'm not sure he provides that 48 minutes of rim protection, elite rim protection that Thibodeau looks for. But neither did Precious Achiuwa. And he filled a need, and Holmes is probably more offensively versatile from day one than someone like Achiuwa. That said, would he work as a 4? If he could, if you buy the shot, maybe he could share the floor with Hart and Robinson in that second unit and not be too harmful in terms of spacing. But he's awesome, but he might be better suited for a team like maybe the Phoenix Suns that's willing to go all in offensively. You need to have a plan for him because he's really talented. He has the potential to be one of those guys who's an offensive supernova in a ground and pound league like the A10. He was everywhere offensively, making pull-up mid-range shots, just shooting over people with his height, shooting a little bit from the 3, getting inside, good ball handling, good footwork, but the defense. And for Tom Thibodeau, the defense is probably paramount. So I don't know that the fit is necessarily there. If they did take him, it would be a zag from their typical profile, and maybe that's what they need to do at this stage.
Maybe. It would be interesting. I find him a very fascinating player. Like you said, defense, I still think he has a ways to go. Offensively, really talented. Not a bad passer either. Something to watch with him that would help. The Knicks already have a good passing center in Isaiah Hartenstein if he does return. Yves Missi from Baylor and Khalil Ware of Indiana. I know for you they're intriguing options at the 5. What do you like about both of these prospects?
So Yves Missi reminds me a bit, actually, of a younger Mitchell Robinson. Not perfectly defensively disciplined, but certainly athletic and mobile enough to be like Starbucks in New York City. All over the place. You turn every corner, they're there, even if you don't expect it, right? I think if Edey is off the board, Missi would be a great option to play understudy to Mitchell Robinson and to Isaiah Hartenstein if you retain him. That said, he's a little raw right now. Needs some polish, and if Hartenstein takes flight to Oklahoma City or a team like Orlando, Missi might not be someone that Thibodeau would trust more than an Edey playing those center minutes early on. Now, Khalil Ware, talk about a dynamic offensive talent at 7'1", who has the defensive mixtape to match. That makes a lot of people comfortable with projecting him as a strong two-way player. I think also he's a bit more raw than people think. Yes, he has great touch, inside and out. But how many off-the-dribble jumpers is he going to be taking as a rookie center in the NBA? Given his aversion to tough, nasty, physical, straight-line drives to the paint, how often will he get to show off that touch around the rim? He's a skilled shot blocker, but he can be a bit trigger-happy on jumps and block attempts. We've seen that go either way, right? A lot of people had that criticism about Cam Brink, and she's been great in the W thus far, blocking shots. People said, oh, she fouled out of her last game, no discipline. How about the rookie season she's turning in, right? But I'm just not sure that Ware's brand of basketball, which likely one day will be really cool and really impressive, fits the Knicks this early on. And we know they love to snap photos through that lens of instant impact. What can you do for me today? What role can you fill for me today? I don't think Ware has the mobility backpedaling or laterally to play the 4. So he's kind of pigeonholed in at the 5, and not in offensive comparison, but defensively, it makes me think of someone like James Wiseman, who I didn't have a lottery grade on in his draft, not because I didn't think he was uber talented on the offensive end of the floor, but because how often is he going to get to show the things he's great at the NBA level when teams are constantly looking to put young bigs in disadvantageous situations?
Yeah, that's the thing, and I think you bring up here, and I think people should know when you talk about all these players, I think a good thing when you're looking at it, and these are all projections, folks. None of us know how these players are going to turn out. Nothing's guaranteed. They usually say drafts are a crapshoot. You do, I think, have to consider what the player can do at the NBA level, and then also how are they able to showcase that. And this is where I always bring up the word fit. Fit matters, right? What a player might be able to showcase in another system might not work in your system. So you have to consider all that stuff. That's why these decisions are tough. That's why we're here breaking it down. Now, you know this. The Knicks, they had forward Tyler Smith out of the G League Ignite. He came in for a workout. He's shown, if you look at his game, great athleticism. He's got some playmaking abilities in the G League. We've seen that. How do you evaluate his transition in his game to the NBA? And what role, if selected, might he play for the Knicks? Where would he fit on this Knicks squad?
So we'll start there. Smith, to me, is a 4 through and through. And
Okay.
at least early on, he's pleasantly reminiscent of power forwards from the late 2000s, early 2010s, but he's also shown range. And I don't mean in his performances, I mean from deep, from downtown. He's got three-point range. Even with Julius Randle on the roster right now, the Knicks would not have the same pressure they had to get Smith minutes. They wouldn't have the same pressure to get Smith minutes they had with an Obi Toppin, who they selected 8th overall, especially if Smith gets taken in the back end of the first round. That said, I do see him as an upside shot kind of pick, which isn't typically what New York has targeted, as we've discussed, but maybe it's time to take those kind of chances given how good their roster is right now. Think Peyton Watson to Denver, right? That's a team who selected someone who averaged 1.8 points per game out of UCLA because of what they thought he could be. And the G League Ignite certainly won't be forever, right? But it's a good testing ground for guys to go up against pros. And that said, Smith showed a lot of versatility. The passing is there. Again, how functional is it? How much will he have the ball in playmaking opportunities? Probably just out of the low post. So how often are the Knicks going to be posting him up? How often? It's not like someone like Edey, where he's 7'4" and he can just drop the ball in the basket like he's playing pool basketball, right? With Smith, it's a little different. Maybe you're looking at an eventual application of his talents the way Milwaukee utilizes a Brook Lopez. Not that Smith is that caliber of rim protector, but the big who can float outside.
Yeah, and that's a very valuable skill set in the NBA to have, along with his athleticism. So we'll see how that goes. He's a very intriguing prospect. Two other ones at the forward spot that we find intriguing that have got some versatility. Jonathan Mogbo of San Francisco and Baylor Shireman from Creighton. There's some concerns with Shireman, one talks about him, with his ability to defend at the next level. Would Mogbo, if you're taking the two of these guys, would he be the better fit for the Knickerbockers because of his defensive versatility?
That's a tough one, Dex. I will sound like an old school coach here and say that 51% of defense is just effort.
I knew you were going to say that.
How much you want it, right? Mogbo is a far better fit defensively. He's also the textbook definition of a non-shooter. In his 2-year college career, he took 2 3-point shots. They both came in his freshman season. So in his sophomore season, he didn't take a single one. Now, he can thrive off of smart cuts and dunks with his physicality. Remember OG Anunoby's first game for the Knicks at home against the Timberwolves? He didn't know the playbook, and he was out there filling in open space, cutting to the paint on time, and flushing with 2 hands for an easy 2 points. But he doesn't give defenses a reason to close out hard on him the way that Anunoby does as a 3-point threat. So assuming that Mogbo would play in the second unit, is there enough spacing between him and Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson out there? Maybe not. Shireman, on the other hand, I think the defense, he wants it, right? And that's where that 51% comes in. He wants it. He is definitely a Tibbs guy to me. And I think that that's incorrectly translated sometimes to just being a strong defender, a bulldog out there. Thibodeau just wants effort, all of your effort, to be at your best and try to give your best when your best is needed, even if you're not at your best. That's literally a quote from him in a post-game press conference in the playoffs. Shireman is versatile offensively. He can shoot that thing, and he could be an exciting add to the Knicks reserve unit, someone Thibodeau might trust to fill in for an injured player. Now, if he slides to 38, which I doubt will happen, you just take him there. No questions asked, in my opinion. If you're taking 2 guys in the first round, he could be one. If you trade back one of the picks, he could definitely be a target. Maybe you trade out from one of them, exchange it for a 2026 first rounder, protected in some funny Brock Aller ways, and you select Shireman with the other, because he's just good. And some guys can just play. I think Shireman will look like that in the NBA. He's versatile, and Sam Vecini on that episode of Draft Class was talking about Devin Carter, Tyler Kolek, and Baylor Shireman being the 3 players that Big East players, coaches, player personnel talked about as being the best players in the Big East.
And I think it matters with Shireman, like you said, the want to, right? Like sometimes you need players that just want to. yes, he may not look like the best defender right now, but does he want to be a better defender? And Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks might want to get some of those guys in to just say, hey, they got that want to, right? They want to get better on the defensive end, and maybe Shireman's that guy. Because I like his offensive tools, and I think he's very, for lack of a better term, plug and play. You could put him into a lot of different systems, and I think he functions well. Could be one for the Knicks to keep an eye on there. Okay, you and I, we talked about this a little bit before because we both like a couple of the same wings here in this draft that could be available for the Knicks. Let's go back to the G League Ignite because Ron Holland, high motor wing, right? Everybody knows what the high motor wing is. He's got a lot of energy. He's going to keep coming at you. Why do you like him in New York as a fit? And where do you think he goes in the draft? Because is he going to be around in the mid-20s or is he gone before that?
So ahead of the NBA draft, again, it's smokescreen season, right? Similarly to quarterbacks in the NFL draft where some team is a huge fan of J.J. McCarthy and then he's on the clock and they don't take him, the Giants, you know? But I think he's off the board by the late lottery, even though some reports are coming out recently that teams are souring on him a little bit. He's a great kid, great work ethic, great motor, like you said. But if a team there in the late lottery thinks all of their guys are gone and the Knicks have the picks that could allow them to help fill out their rotation, 24, 25, and 38, maybe they'd consider those 3 picks as enough. To me, this is like Cam Whitmore sliding last year, but Holland is not the athlete that Whitmore was. He also doesn't come with the injury concerns that Whitmore did. So there's give and take to everything, right? I wouldn't trade future draft capital if I were the Knicks to move up. Why? That lens that we're looking through of that future star trade. But Holland was cast into a role with the G League Ignite where he had to do everything. Get the play started and finish it himself, like someone throwing the football and running deep to catch it, you know? And that role was too big for him at the time. But in my opinion, it bodes really well for his long-term development. If you take a look at a lot of the NBA's best role players, they're guys who had a high usage rate in college and learned what to do in those split-second decision moments, getting comfortable with the ball in their hand. He got practice running the show. And even if you're a role player, look at the Knicks particularly, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart. These are guys who are at their best when they're making quick decisions off the catch. Wings who are capable on the ball have run the NBA for years. And the Knicks moving up and drafting Holland would represent both an acknowledgement of the fact that the wing is the most important position or the most impactful swing position in roster construction. And also the fact that the Knicks don't really have a wing right now that puts the ball on the floor and scores consistently. We were talking both about the need for young talent and now these wings, you know, Barrett and Quickly both going up north to Toronto. Barrett was that kind of put the ball on the floor, just keep trying to ram his head through the wall and score wing. The Knicks don't have that anymore because they went for a complement to Brunson and Randall, their 2 all-star, all-NBA talents. That said, if you like your team the way it is now, why not take a dart throw at someone who could, and could is doing a lot of work there, but could be an NBA star one day. That's the thing about this draft class. It's so evened out in terms of who you should pick where. That word you said earlier, fit, becomes more important than ever.
Yeah, more important than ever. It matters. Ron Holland, a guy the Knicks could look at, might have to trade up for him. You say you see him going towards the end of the lottery, so a lot of teams might value him there, but you don't know what the value is, and that's what makes this all so interesting. Now, Kris, we haven't talked about an international player yet in this draft, so let's talk about Pacome Dadie, who I like. I've watched some stuff on this guy. I like his game. For me, it seems very smooth and under control. And I'll be my bias here. I like that. I like that when I watch games on the court. Are you under control? The other thing that's intriguing to me, and I think you might find this interesting too, is his size, okay? You got some good size. You got good defensive ability with him. When you look at him and how he can fit with this Knicks squad, is he the kind of player that this roster needs? I see a good fit for him here, and I think he's another plug-and-play guy that could work with a lot of teams. But do you think for this Knicks team, he's the kind of player they need?
Dadie is a really fun evaluation, I think, particularly because of his explosiveness, the athleticism, the testables out there, right? He could be a pick the Knicks make and then stash in Europe for a season. He's one of the youngest players in this entire draft, right? So the plug-and-play nature might not be an easy sell with Tom Thibodeau with such a young player. But that said, he could definitely grow into someone that helps an NBA team play measuredly fast and physical basketball. He doesn't fit that instant impact bill to me because he's got some stuff to learn. Again, I think I'm 3 years older than him, so that's something. But if the Knicks can't find a deal to trade out of one of their picks and get good enough value back, they could draft Dadier and stash him for a year and not have to worry too much. You take a look at what they did just a couple years ago. Quentin Grimes at 25, Rokas Jokubaitis at 34, Deuce McBride at 36.
Yeah, you saw that a couple years ago. He might want to do it here. And if you think he's got the upside, because I like the tools and skills, and he's also got to get a little bit stronger from France. I don't think I mentioned that before. I just said international player, but from France. And you just wonder if there's a guy they could snatch and then he can come and help them down the road, especially we know the Knicks are trying to win now. All right, let's do this. Let's close with some guards. And look, I had to do this. Everybody knows I was going to do this. As a Pitt alum, I got to ask about my guy, Carlton Carrington, also known as Bub Carrington. Look, I love Pitt. You see the colors here. I love his game, 6'5" combo guard. Got better as the season went along in his freshman year. When I look at him, it's like, man, he'd be a really good backup for Jalen Brunson. But here's the thing. I'm not the only person saying this, right? A lot of other people know that he's good, and I think he's projected to at least be a good backup guard in the NBA at worst. People are very high in his ability, and maybe he's able to start. But here's the thing. What's the chance he's going to be available when the Knicks are scheduled to select in the first round? Do the Knicks have any chance of getting him if they do not move up?
In short, and it stinks because I love Bub Carrington and his skill set myself, I've got to burst the bubble, and I've got to say no. He will not be there at 24 from what's going around, from what I've heard, however you want to slice and dice it. But that said, he's someone else who would represent a zag for the Knicks in terms of the profile of player they typically pursue, and to me would be someone worth trading up for, particularly if that's how they want to play the board. Carrington's got on-ball juice. He's got a bag that he can dive into, and I think most importantly for Thibodeau and the New York offense, he's an able and adept pick-and-roll ball handler. He is a machine in running the pick-and-roll. The height is part of it. Tall quarterbacks can see over the defense. Carrington, 6'5", not a little guard. He can make reads a little more easily just because he's naturally predisposed to that, but that's not everything. He's a high IQ passer, someone who knows where the right read is. He can just feel it, and he's got that feel for the game that's really impressive. The thing is, and back to what you said about, other people liking him too, in a draft class like this, if you have a guy you really like, I'll go back to football. You treat him like a potential franchise quarterback. You just take him where you are. So Cleveland, Miami, even the Lakers say that would be maybe the latest he'd go at 21. They got that New Orleans pick now. If they like him, they're just going to take him. They don't care that he's a freshman. They don't care that he has more to grow and show. He's really tantalizing as a prospect just the way he is right now. And as a result, I think he'll be gone at the latest by those late teens. But I will not be sitting there shocked, dropping my water out of my hand if he gets taken at 13 or 14 because someone fell in love with his workout, with his interview, with his tape. If all the stars align, he could be gone in the lottery.
Yeah, and I wonder if the Knicks, if they identified him. This is the major question for me with the Knicks. We talked about Ron Holland with this. We talked about this with him as well. If the Knicks do like a guy, which we haven't seen him really do, are they going to move up and go get that guy that can help this team immediately if they really believe in him? I'd like to see him do it. If that's the case and they end up just taking one and it's a guy they like, so be it. I don't think that would be a bad move. Now, we mentioned Tyler Kolek earlier. And I know A.J. Mitchell out of UC Santa Barbara, is another guy that you have been eyeing for the Knicks. What do you love about his game and his fit for New York, and what can you tell the people about his game for people who weren't watching UC Santa Barbara?
He's super fun. And his dad was a pro player and actually a great defender overseas. Even if it's a stereotype, I love betting on kids who have a parent, mom or dad, who is a pro player, because they've been taught from a very young age what it takes to succeed. Think Stephen Clay, think Larry Nance. All these players, whether their dad or mom was an all-star or whether they just got a cup of coffee in the NBA, they know what it takes to win those margins and what they need to bring to the table. Lots of people see Mitchell as a floor general because that's the role he played in college, but I'm not sure that he'll come into the NBA filling that need or filling that role for a team, especially if that team is good, like the Knicks are. For that reason, you wish he was a bit better of a shooter because given his size at 6'5", he'd be a near perfect fit as an off-ball guard. Like we said earlier, the Knicks could use. He's clever. He's crafty. He makes the most of what he can do out there. Little Brunson-esque, but he's 3 inches taller. And again, that's not a comparison in terms of their game. Just Mitchell is not some super athlete. He's not jumping out the gym. He's not outrunning everyone, but he is crafty. He's got good footwork. He knows what he needs to do to impact the game. I think if the Knicks wind up with him, a year in Westchester would do him really well. He's already a good pick-and-roll ball handler, like we said with Carrington, something they could use, but he doesn't have the size. He doesn't have maybe the natural feel for the game that Carrington has. If they're sold on his shot long-term, a year in Westchester, to me, would be a direct path to a role in the Knicks rotation as an impact player going forward.
All right, so you like him. And listen, I don't want to say athleticism is dead or it's now overrated. Having players who know how to play, who can just play, who are a little bit crafty, have the good footwork, I think when you look at players in this league like a Jalen Brunson, it shows you don't sleep on those players. Players that know how to get to their spots and get it done. There's value in that for sure. All right, this has been great. Last thing, and this is the question I think a lot of people want to know too, besides what the Knicks are going to do this offseason. That is a huge question as well. But Kris, in your eyes, when the 2024 draft is over, when it's all said and done, and we turn our attention to free agency, what does a successful draft look like for the Knicks? The Knicks are done with their draft. It's been a success if this happens. How does that look?
That's tough. I would say no matter how many or what kind of prospects the Knicks wind up with, they should stick to their identity of maximizing value in the overall pursuit of improving the team. That could mean not drafting anyone. That could mean using all 3 picks and drafting players. I don't think not drafting anyone is optimal. Like we said, they could use an infusion of young, cost-controlled talent. But that said, they should not draft somebody just to draft somebody. I don't think it's worth anybody's time. The prospect, the prospect's family, the team, the other players on the roster to try to fit a square peg in a round hole. So go out and get a center and a wing, or get a center and a guard, or a wing and a guard. We could play every combination, right? But don't obsess over positional need, especially because of the free agency period coming up that you mentioned. Hopefully you retain an Anunoby, you retain a Hartenstein, and now that the team won 50 games under Tom Thibodeau, and they're on an upward trajectory with all of their future draft picks, I think more players are going to want to come and fill in those gaps. You know, people will call them the ring chasers, but for a lot of guys, it could be the first opportunity in their career to play for a winning franchise, and the Knicks have good championship habits. Now, that could mean they never break through and win a ring. That could mean they win 4. But you only give yourself a chance if you walk the walk. And the Knicks have the right habits. They're a great organization. Players love playing for them. As a result, I think people will want to come and fill in the gaps. Those needs might be a little easier to fill now that the team is good. The days of overpaying free agents and good players like Bobby Portis, Marcus Morris Sr. came to the Knicks because of the money they were offered. I think those days are over. I think the Knicks are the sell themselves now, not just the amount on the check.
Yeah, shows you where the Knicks have come a long way, I should say, coming from here. And I love your answer there. I think whatever it takes to improve the team, whether it's getting some cost control players, whether it's doing it to free agency, although this is why I'm a big advocate. I wish free agency was before the draft, but that's a whole nother story. I think it helps with the team building and makes it a little bit easier. But I think no matter what they do, I think, the fans, as you know this, from what you do with Knicks Film School, they just want to see the team get better, and hopefully they're able to do that. I do think they need some youth, though, guys. I think they need a little bit of youth to infuse into this team. Did you have fun breaking down the draft? This is what you do.
Absolutely. This is very fun to me. Now I'm trying to get the sleep schedule a little better, but draft coverage for me used to involve 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. film sessions alone in my basement. But now, we've moved that up a little bit. So maybe 6 p.m. to 11 p.m.
There you go.
That said, watching lots of games that I don't think anyone in their right mind, unless they went to the school or have a child on the team, we're watching. It's fun to me because, especially in today's world where you can stream any game at any time from anywhere, scouts will find you. Kawhi Leonard did not go to a super high-profile college, San Diego, right? You saw Ben Shepherd go to the Indiana Pacers out of Belmont.
Yep.
TJ McConnell spent a year at Duquesne before he was recruited to Arizona, and that's where he was really put on the map. But the scouts will find you. And if my goal is to try and do that, I've got to look everywhere, and that's fun to me.
Yeah, it's a fun process. It is a lot of work, folks, as Kris just said, but it is a fun process. And to that point, also when it comes to talent in the NBA, as we've seen over the last decade plus, you can find talent almost anywhere in the draft. We've seen MVPs come middle of the first round, second round. We've seen as well, too, so you can find talent. Jalen Brunson, an MVP candidate, second round draft pick. You can find the talent, and it's about the work putting in. Kris, appreciate you having you here. It's a fantastic breakdown. We got to do this again for sure.
Thank you so much. We'll see, maybe someone gets drafted during a Taco Bell commercial this year and goes on to win MVP themselves. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? You never know with the NBA draft. That is Kris Pursiainen. Check out his work with Knicks Film School and Draft Rules Everything Around Me podcast show. It's a great one. Be sure to check that out. We will see what the Knicks do in the 2024 NBA draft. All right, guys, unbelievably, we're moving into the offseason. So many things to talk about over the next week with the Knicks and also the Brooklyn Nets. Next week, we're going to take a look at free agency for the local teams and what their plans should be this summer to improve their rosters. Special thanks to my guest this week, Kris Pursiainen, and for the great people who made it possible to do this episode, my producer, Lee Insler, editor, Antonio Oliveros-Nicol, and director, Brianna Mutsin-Dashiaka. I'm Dexter Henry. It's time to bounce, but we'll see you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.